Welcome to episode 58 of the G2 on 5G. It's the latest insight scoop on everything 5G. We cover 6 topics in about 15 minutes, and it's brought to you by More Insights and Strategy. I'm Will Townsend, and joining me again this week is fellow analyst Anshel Sag. Let's get started with my first topic. So, Anshel, you and I were pre-briefed on this announcement, but it broke today. T-Mobile announced with Halo a partnership that's going to leverage T-Mobile's pretty expansive footprint in Las Vegas to help Halo deliver on a 5G remote piloted car program. And, is this the killer use case that we've all been waiting for with respect to 5G? I think it does demonstrate just the power of 5G with its ultra low latency and its extremely fast throughput over LTE. It's from my perspective, it's pretty exciting. We got to spend time with John Saw as well as one of the founders of Halo, and I believe Halo is founded by former executives from Uber, among some other companies as well. But what are your initial thoughts?
My thoughts are that this is one of those applications that was kind of not possible before
Mm-hmm.
5G, because I'm sure people had the idea in the past, but the upload speeds of 3G and 4G simply weren't good enough to enable a remote driver to bring this car from one user to the next, right? Because this is a service where the consumer technically drives themselves,
Yeah.
but the car will be driven to them by a remotely piloted driver. So it's an interesting business. It's a different 5G use case than what people are mostly expecting out of a vehicle, which is full autonomy, or some kind of infotainment. So this is an interesting blend of what would be considered a car sharing service, but also a driverless car. So it's very interesting, and I do think that this is a really good win for T-Mobile as well, because this kind of showcases that T-Mobile's open innovation labs are working,
Yeah.
and that the company is attracting enterprises to its network, which it has traditionally not done in the past. So this is a really good proof point for one, its network, but two, its business acumen. So I think it's a really big significance for them.
Yeah, and to kind of clarify things a little bit further as well, I asked this question of John. This doesn't necessarily operate on a particular spectrum band, right? So the Halo has done and they've developed all of the the automation behind it to leverage the full sort of spectrum, low, mid, and high band. And really this is really demonstrating the power of having in T-Mobile having a 5G network that's deployed in that lower and that mid band to get the right kind of level of propagation. And I think it's pretty cool too, because it kind of makes me think about how the military flies these unmanned drones remotely from these bunkers and containers and that sort of thing. So it's a similar deal. And I think this might be a great step in the direction of getting people comfortable with autonomous vehicles and autonomous driving. Like you mentioned, it's basically the service will be to deliver the car remotely without anyone in it, obviously. And then when the user opens the car, then they're driving the car. So there's no remote piloting of the car. When there's a person in the car, that could change over time. This is what Halo kind of positioned as their phase one, but I think the applications are pretty exciting. So we'll definitely keep our eyes and ears open and report back as things develop. But let's move to your first topic this week. And you found some news that I wasn't aware of related to my alma mater and 6G.
Yeah. So today, I think, so today announcement came through that the University of Texas in Austin, or also known as UT, has officially launched its 6G research center, with support from major wireless players, including AT&T, Samsung, and Qualcomm. There are other founding members, including NVIDIA and Interdigital. And this 6G research center will be kind of a bridge between, the UT Department of Electrical and Computer Engineering and the industry, and helping one another to research things like terahertz, but also how, AI and different types of sensors might affect how 6G standards and research are conducted. Apparently, the founding companies, those five I mentioned, have agreed to fund at least 2 research projects at the UT Center for 6G, which is called 6G at UT, for the next 3 years. And in addition to the funding, they will also contribute industry expertise, working with UT researchers, faculty, and students to develop these foundational 6G technologies. So this is a very involved partnership by the looks of it. And I expect that it will continue to grow as as more companies want to get involved with 6G early on. But this kind of shows you which companies are already engaging early on with some of the leading in universities in doing technology research. And yeah, it looks like all the big companies you would expect in the space that would want to work with UT are there. And I think that this will probably grow to a lot more companies than what we see today.
Yeah, I agree.
Since it's just the founding of it, right?
Yeah. So, and although I was not aware of this news, I'm going to dig into it over the weekend because I am a Longhorn. I have visited their lab facility where they were very involved, in massive MIMO and 5G and that sort of thing. And I forget the name of the of that lab. I'm assuming that this is sort of an extension, as they look at 6G. And they've had a lot of investment in the past, around 5G with Qualcomm, NI, formerly National Instruments, that's based in Austin, do a lot of test and measurement for 5G deployment. They've also been a part of this kind of joint venture with UT, for 5G. So I expect NI is probably involved in this, but this is exciting for my alma mater. And hey, we haven't even finished deploying 5G, and we've already got universities focused on it, which I think is the right thing to do to get ahead of everything. So, but let's move to my second topic this week, and I want to talk about AT&T and Google. So during Mobile World Congress in our last podcast, I mentioned an announcement between Google Cloud and Ericsson to drive edge enablement. I spoke with Matt Kempko with SDX Central this week, and he wanted to get some of my perspective on Google, and certainly Google is in third place relative to AWS and Azure in my mind with respect to edge and telco and that sort of thing. But
among other things.
Yeah, among other things. But so that announcement during Mobile World Congress with Ericsson, I think, was really, really positive. And then this week, AT&T, just on the heels of its announcing its moving its 5G mobile network into the Azure cloud, announced that they're going to partner with Google for edge enablement. And I expected there would be some edge enablement that would come out of that Azure announcement, but it looks to me that AT&T is taking a multi-cloud approach. And I think that's going to buy them, flexibility, with respect to deploying both consumer and enterprise services. But what are your thoughts?
No, I think it's the right approach. I think if you want to be a vendor, or in this case, you want to be a network operator and you want to be able to scale, you want to have pretty much all of the different CSPs in your network at one point or another. Mm-hmm. And I think that eventually they'll probably have all 3 cloud vendors in their network at one point or another, because it's going to be something that's going to be necessary to deliver certain applications in the network.
Yeah, I mean, just look at the news that came out of this JEDI program, right? Where I think the federal government had doubled down on one cloud provider, and now they're sort of blowing that up. I think they realize that the smart approach is multi-cloud, right? And And all of these companies have, different, kind of capabilities, to bring to bear. And what I like about Azure and AT&T, I just recently published a Forbes article, some of my insights this week there, but that also, I believe, gives AT&T another route to market into the enterprise. When you think about Microsoft, and you think about how prevalent they are in the enterprise with some of their core products, like Office and Teams, and and other platforms as well. So again, I think this is a bright strategy on AT&T's part, and I think this is good for Google as well. I think this is going to put some wind in Google's sails, additional wind, and it's always good to have strong competitors, because from my perspective, when you have a very highly competitive market, that's when innovation really gets driven. So, but let's move to your second topic this week, and you found a report related to 5G service delivery. So why don't you share those details with us?
Yeah, so there's a company that does these surveys among many other services that they provide. And this was kind of an updated report on overall global 5G penetration, specifically focusing on countries and cities. And their report found that there were 1,662 cities with 5G across 65 countries. And that among the top countries with the most 5G cities, it was China, the US, and the Philippines in the top three, and then South Korea, Canada, Finland, Spain, Italy, and the UK, followed by Australia and Saudi Arabia. What is interesting is that they said that there was a 20% increase in new 5G cities since the beginning of this year. So in basically the first half of the year, 301 new cities were added to their list of 5G serviced cities around the world. So this is like their mid-year update, and it's showing also that in Asia, they are ahead of Europe and the Americas in terms of having 5G coverage, with 641 cities having 5G coverage compared to Europe's EMEA, it's Europe and the Middle East. So EMEA getting 623 and the Americas having 398. So it's like a summary of kind of understanding where 5G penetration is today, but it doesn't necessarily talk about coverage or actual users. But it's an interesting update to get to understand kind of what the growth rate is, and 20% in 6 months is quite good.
It is. And, I want to dig into this report because I haven't had a lot of time, with it. But Viavi, I guess I may be mispronouncing the name. Viavi, that's the company that founded it or commissioned it. Question for you. I mean, did they go into like discrete 5G services? Did they break it down into that, or were they really just talking about kind of 5G access deployment?
5G access was really the focus. They just generically called it 5G services.
Okay, yeah, because that would be really interesting, and maybe you and I can do some digging there, and we can share that on a future podcast. But we talked about the T-Mobile Halo partnership. That's super innovative, and I've been on record as saying that I believe the majority of 5G services are going to be enterprise focused. I mean, there's some obvious consumer ones that we've talked about in the past, but that would be interesting. And I think as deployments get more mature, I think we'll start seeing some of that data come out, and I think that's something that our viewers and listeners would probably be really interested in. So, but let's move to my third topic this week, and it's Huawei in the news. And this is no surprise. I actually sort of predicted this. With all the challenges they've had with entity listing and that sort of thing, they announced this week that they are working on a very broad program to develop semiconductor fabrication capabilities. So HiSilicon is Huawei's fabless design, semiconductor design organization. And I did predict, I think I wrote this in the Forbes article several months ago, that the company was likely going to have to pivot and invest in fab, and that's very expensive. It's in the multi-billions of dollars, and you're a little bit deeper on semiconductor than I am, so would love your insight here in a moment. But The question I have is, can Huawei? I mean, that's a pretty monumental task, and China has not been strong in semiconductor fabrication. That's why so much of it has been outsourced. That's really a leadership that the U.S. has and Taiwan has as well. But my question is, can Huawei scale this quickly enough to support its needs for 5G? From an infrastructure perspective and a device perspective. So I'd love to get your insight on that.
I think based on the information that I've seen, there hasn't really been any substantive information about how far along Huawei's efforts really are.
Yeah.
If these efforts have just begun, they're probably 2 to 4 years out. I saw some article mentioning that they might have production next year, which either assumes that they've already been doing this for the last 2 to 3 years,
Stealth.
or they don't understand how semiconductor fabbing works.
Right.
But I would say that I understand why Huawei would do something like this. I think the problem is that getting access to let's say 5 nanometer, right, which is where a lot of Huawei's competitors are today.
Yeah.
I don't understand how 5 nanometer is possible in China today. They are many nodes behind in their best fabs. So I struggle to understand where this is going, or how it will even be achieved. But I think that it's a pretty empty rumor. But I can understand why it would happen, and why people would think it's possible.
Yeah.
But realistically and practically speaking, I think it's fairly it might actually happen, but I don't think it'll happen anytime soon if it does.
Yeah, it's going to be challenging. I mean, it's a very, very high bar, with respect to getting into fabrication. So we'll definitely keep our eyes and ears peeled here. So, but let's move to your third and final topic this week, and we're going to talk about T-Mobile again, and this is related to a sporting application, right?
Yes. So I believe next weekend is the All-Star game. And that will happen. Yeah, it looks like it happens July 12th. It's about a week away. And essentially during the All-Star game, T-Mobile is getting very involved, especially for the Home Run Derby, which is actually going to be called the T-Mobile Home Run Derby. But what makes it interesting is, one, they will have an AR app that allows you to watch the Home Run Derby in augmented reality. I actually have downloaded the app and tried it out myself. They showed it for last year's Home Run Derby, and you can actually see like a very detailed model of the stadium where it's being played, and then you can see someone hitting home runs and see the distances. It's very cool. But while that could be a 5G application with users using this over 5G, the real interesting 5G application is their addition of 5G Player PoV cameras, where they will be, for the first time ever, attaching HD 5G cameras to players, both on their hats and on the catcher's mask, to essentially give first person perspective of what the players are seeing during the game, which has never been done before.
Super cool.
And it will be very interesting to see how that looks. It says that they're going to be doing this both with audio and video using T-Mobile's 5G network, and that there will also be batting practice that you can watch as well, from a first-person perspective. So I'm very excited to see what this looks like. But it seems like 5G is going to be very heavily touted during the All-Star game, especially during the Home Run Derby.
That's awesome. I'm a big Astros fan. I lived in Houston for 10 plus years. And so let's definitely share the link where, our, viewers and listeners can download, at least on the video version of our podcast, where they can download that app. And I'm definitely going to do that as well and play around with it. So
yeah, it's open to everybody, not just T-Mobile users.
Okay, that's awesome. That's good to know. So, well, great. Hey, buddy, another great podcast this week. Why don't you take us home?
Absolutely. We hope our viewers and listeners found this week's topics interesting. If anyone out there would like to provide insight on a specific 5G topic for a future podcast, please reach out to us on social media. Will is at Whaletown Tech, and I'm at Anshel. We hope you have a great weekend, and please tune in again next week.